Tonight is a long video, so we'll crack straight on with it. David Weiss, also known as DITRH, gets onto a radio phone-in show, and I sort of get involved. Big thanks to Pixel Domination for the tip for this one. We better get on with it. Roll VT. Welcome to The Other Side of Midnight with me, your host, Frank Morano, on Talk Radio WABC, coming at you across the globe. I'm not kidding anyone, am I? All right, Frank, I'll let you do the intros.
Is the Earth flat? There is a growing movement, not just in this country, but around the world, that believes that it is. We're going to talk with David Weiss, host
I shouldn't bother.
of the Flat Earth podcast, one of the most popular podcasts on this subject.
What's he got? Seven followers.
34, this is The Other Side of Midnight. Well, a question that has been debated for literally millennia is the shape of the Earth. What sort of a shape is it? Well, what we've seen in the last few years is an incredible momentum building behind a movement
Called Flat Earth Debunkers.
I guess you'd call it a movement, of people that believe the Earth is flat.
Oh, that motley crew.
Why has this movement taken hold? Well,
I had a movement earlier on. Mrs. S said she couldn't go in the room after that.
we have one of the most popular Flat Earth podcasters on the line with us right now, David Weiss. He's the...
That's obviously some new definition of the word popular that I've not been previously aware of.
Host of the Flat Earth podcast. Hopefully he can give us some answers. David, good morning. Thanks for joining me on the radio this morning.
Good morning, Frank. Glad to be here. Excited about this conversation.
Me too. So let's start from the beginning. Why do you think the Earth is flat rather than spherical like we were taught in fourth grade?
I'd suggest, Frank, it's lack of education or stupidity or the urge to sell T-shirts and mugs.
I grew up like everybody else, and I believed what everyone believes, that the Earth is a spinning ball flying through an infinite vacuum. But then one day...
What? One day you had a head injury or something?
Not just one day. People started sending me messages, hey, have you looked into Flat Earth? And like any smart person, I would delete those messages and ban them from our social media.
Sounds good move. So where did it all go wrong?
Because for being so dumb, basically, to even suggest such a thing. But then I was forced, kicking and screaming, to look into it, and I went in with a biased attitude to prove it wrong and to prove the globe right. And for 2 weeks, I tried every ball earth proof I thought I had when I actually looked at it and applied actual science and not scientism to it.
Right, so you spent the majority of your life knowing, understanding, accepting, believing in the globe Earth, and in 2 weeks of derp, and you threw it all away.
Realized that it was nonsense. And then, flash forward 6 years later, here I am talking to you. I'm a host of the Flat Earth podcast, creator of the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app, and
sell that.
Trying to spread this message around the world.
Other things spread around the world like that are treated as a pandemic.
Well, so what led you to believe, based on the science that you studied and your own observations, that the Earth was flat rather than a spinning ball?
I'm going to say a lack of understanding.
So the first thing is you have to, we've all been programmed to think that Flat Earth is something that it's not. Flat Earth is not a flat pancake flying in space with other flat planets or even round planets. It's nothing like that at all. There's
Well, it'd be nice to know what it is like. We certainly haven't seen a map of it, David.
no edge to the flat Earth. Well, how could that be if it's flat? Whereas, what's on the other side, what's on the edge? So the way I like to describe it is, you know what a puddle is? A puddle is where water accumulates at the low spot in the land, and the
I'm glad you're here to tell us these things, David.
edge of the puddle is where the water's just higher, the land's just higher than the water, right? Expand that out to a pond, bigger to a lake, Same thing. The edge of the lake is where the land is higher. Well, now think of the whole world as a giant lake.
I think you should stick with a pond and the rest of the slime.
And the land that surrounds us is higher than the level of the ocean. And that land we call Antarctica.
No. The edge of Antarctica is not that long. It could not possibly reach all the way around the world. And much of Antarctica is barely above sea level. It's land with an awful lot of ice on it.
Antarctica is the highest land on Earth.
No, it isn't.
It is the edge of the world ocean.
No, it isn't.
So if you sail to the edge of the ocean, you're not going to fall off because you're not at the edge of a pancake. You're at the edge of a lake. And Antarctica, the surface of Antarctica is like 200 feet higher than the water.
Have a look at these photos. These are photos of Antarctica. Now, this one is your typical flat earther provided ice wall. It's actually the Larsen B ice shelf. It's thick ice floating on water. If that is the edge of the world, the edge of our pond, if you like, the sea would flow underneath it.
So you get up there, and then it goes on and on and on. We don't know how far it goes because it's off limits to everybody.
No, it isn't.
The Antarctic Treaty doesn't allow anybody to go there. So that was the...
Yes, it does. I'll put over there the Antarctic Treaty. I'll let it scroll. It won't take too long. It's only a couple of sides of A4.
First thing that got me, I'm like, why is that off limits? And it's off limits until the year 2041.
I had a look. I couldn't find any reference to 2041. I hope that the Antarctic Treaty goes on beyond that or is resubmitted to carry on beyond that, because it's to protect that pristine environment. It's to stop exploitation and to stop it being used as any form of military base or anything like that. So the only reason military can ever go there is in support of scientific expeditions.
And nobody can even question the treaty until then.
So the thing that keeps people from sailing off the edge of the Earth is the fact that Antarctica, being elevated so high above sea level, provides sort of an not artificial, but a barrier that keeps people from sailing off the edge of the Earth.
But of course, we can climb Everest, but apparently we can't climb this 200-foot tall ice wall. We can fly aircraft, but we can't fly and see what's out there.
Well, can you sail off the edge of a lake? It's kind of a misnomer where if you sail to the edge of a lake, you don't fall off the lake. You're at the edge of the lake. That's where the land starts. Well, that's what Antarctica is. Antarctica is the land at the edge of our oceans.
And yet all you're showing in this video is ice shelves that are floating on the ocean.
Higher than our oceans, so it contains our oceans. So you got to think of the world as a much, much, much bigger place. Antarctica is most likely bigger than all of the oceans and all of the countries combined.
Most likely. So you don't know. You're going to need some evidence to support it. You can't just make claims.
It's not a little continent at the bottom of a ball.
I beg to differ. We have sailed all the way around it. You can see it in satellite imagery.
The land that surrounds our world oceans, and it's off limits to everybody. Now,
no, it isn't. You can work there. You can take a cruise there.
People say, well, you can go there on vacation. You can go tour. There's 15 different companies that you can go for $10,000 to $30,000 just for a couple of days. But those 15 companies are all run by the same guy.
And you're just showing a ship against the ice. Where's that 200-foot ice wall there? Those people seem to have had no difficulty getting onto Antarctica.
It's only one company. So that was suspicious in itself. But then when you go there, they only take you to a little peninsula. They show you some icebergs and some penguins, and then they bring you to the ceremonial South Pole, and they tell you it's the South Pole. But
yes, what you can see there is the ceremonial South Pole. Quite right. It is not at the actual geographic South Pole, which looks like this and is fairly uninspiring. and it has to be repositioned every year due to the movement of the ice. The ceremonial South Pole is only a few metres away from the geographic South Pole. Big deal.
There's no way to verify it because compasses don't work and GPS doesn't work. And they even tell you it's a ceremonial South Pole. So
yeah, for photographic opportunities. And as I said, it's only metres away from the actual geographic.
It's not even a South Pole.
So you believe that, and we're talking with David Weiss from the Flat Earth podcast, you believe that if we had, say, unfettered access to Antarctica, not prohibited from exploration by this treaty, that...
You can go to Antarctica. Antarctica is a dangerous place. You can't just let people go wandering willy-nilly around it because they'll end up dead. And if they need to be rescued, that's rather an expensive pastime, and your government has to pick up the tab for it. So, yeah, you can go under conditions.
There would be proof that people could observe for themselves that the Earth is indeed flat.
No. All you would see is a lot of ice. If you could see, just with your naked eyes, stood on the ground, that the Earth is either flat or curved, then you'd be able to see it here or wherever you are. There's nothing special about Antarctica.
I believe that the people that are running our world, our leaders, as we call them, when they got planes that were good enough to explore Antarctica in the maybe late 40s, early 50s, into the 1950s.
So planes have been there then?
They went to Antarctica, and then Admiral Byrd, he did his the first flight out over Antarctica, and he came back and went on television and said he discovered land bigger than America, filled with resources that no human has ever stepped foot on.
Well, Antarctica, off the top of my head, is something like 24 million square miles, and America's about 9. So, yeah, it's quite a lot of land there. And it's a big place. And,
bigger than America, that's bigger than they're showing us Antarctica is.
No. Make a comparison, and you'll see that Antarctica is bigger than North America. As in the US.
But then right after he made that speech, he never spoke again.
He was probably sick of being of his clip being used by conspiracy theorists even back then.
And they started the Antarctic Treaty. All the countries in the world got together.
No, they didn't. 12 did. There were 12 original signatories to the Antarctic Treaty, and those were countries that had a direct involvement with Antarctica. Since then, others have joined, and now I think it's about 55 odd. But you are wrong. It was 12. How many times during this interview are you going to be wrong, David?
Right? They all got together and agreed that we must protect Antarctica.
Yes.
We must protect the penguins and the ice.
Well, the environment as a whole, yes.
Oh, no one can drop a cigarette butt on this pristine ice. And also it's military, we have to, because our enemies could sneak under the planet and come up and attack us.
Well, so don't you think it's a good idea then? If your enemies can't use Antarctica as some sort of forward base, you can't use it as a forward base against them. It protects everyone. That's a good thing, isn't it?
So those are the two reasons the Antarctic Treaty went into effect, and it goes all the way to the year 2041. And
again, you've mentioned 2041. I can't confirm or deny that. I've not found reference to that.
And don't think that when we get to 2041, they're just going to open it up. They're going to kick it down the road another 60 years.
Well, what would you rather? That they started drilling for oil, dumping rubbish, and then building forward air bases there for attack on other countries? Do you think that's a better use of the place? Or do you think we should keep it as a pristine, natural environment? So,
what shape is the Earth if it's flat? Is it a circular disc? Is it more like something with four corners, as the Bible might suggest, or is it some other shape?
Well, first, it's not about the shape, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's about the lie, and the lie is when you say why would they lie, the lie is
probably to do with your religion.
is the reason. It's all about control. But let's talk about the shape a little bit. The best way I can describe it is the Earth system, the Earth that we live on, is the basement of the universe. I have no better words to describe it. It's just...
Is that because you live in your mum's basement?
The foundation of the universe. And
that's got to be religious based, hasn't it? That you can't conceive that the Earth is not the centre of the universe, or probably that you are not the centre of the universe. And to make yourself feel happy, you have to assume that you are.
And we live in this melted puddle that our sun has melted. Our close, small sun has circles around and has melted out these oceans and land masses.
Isn't that convenient that this sun is, I'll use the word orbiting, but circling around, melted all this ice from the oceans and the land that we live on, and it just happens to be circling around within this the edges of this Antarctic puddle shape. So isn't that handy? And also, if it's melted the world's oceans, why hasn't it melted all of the Arctic? Why does that freeze that's in the middle?
That's where we live. And people say, well, what's on the other side? Well, the deepest hole ever dug, flat Earth or globe Earth, doesn't matter. The deepest hole ever dug is in Russia. It's the Great Borehole or the Great Borehole, something like that. And it's just short of 8 miles, like 7.5 miles, where they couldn't dig any farther. It was too hot, too hard. They hit like an impenetrable barrier.
What, your head? No, the reasons the Russians stopped drilling was the collapse of the Soviet Union.
And they couldn't get through it. And so that, if you want to put that in scale, that's like you have an apple and you're drilling halfway through the skin of the apple.
Well, that might give you some idea of the scale of the Earth.
The funny thing is, while they were drilling that hole, they were using ground-penetrating radar to see what they were going to hit next, and they were wrong every step of the way. They're like, all right, no more rocks. They hit rocks. Oh, no more water. Then they hit water. So they went halfway through the skin of an apple. They were wrong every step of the way. They hit an impenetrable barrier. They can't get any deeper, but somehow they know what's in the center of the Earth.
We wouldn't be drilling down to find out what's in the middle of the Earth. Are you seriously suggesting we drill down thousands of miles into liquid rock? No. The reason we know what's inside the Earth is because of P waves and S waves that are generated during earthquakes.
That's pseudoscience.
Pretty interesting. How do you explain the images that we've seen from space? Are the astronauts that have seen a spherical Earth, are they in on the big lie?
Yeah, Frank. See, this is the part that gets a lot of people because I'm in my late 50s. And I was a kid when the moon landings happened, and
then you should know better.
These guys are our heroes, but there's a serious problem with NASA and all space agencies. NASA never even uses the word photo. They will never refer to a photo of the Earth. They only call it images and pictures because they don't want to.
The reason that is that the images are nearly always stitched together. Just like when you take panoramic images with an iPhone or something. That doesn't imply anything underhand. It just means you're stitching together images. They're taking images of an entire planet from only a couple hundred miles up. You're not going to get it all in like you seem to want.
Lie directly to us and say that it's a photo. They admit that all of the images of Earth are put together with strips of data from lower altitude flights taking those pictures.
Well, there you go then. What's the problem?
They claim it's from satellites or the space station, but that's not true.
Well, you can watch live stream video from the ISS. I suggest you do, David.
They're just from high altitude planes and stripped together. And
oh, really? High altitude planes? Well, the imagery you can get from the ISS is way beyond what I got with my Mage high altitude balloon experiment. And that went up to 38.5 or 38.25 kilometres. That's a lot higher than you're going to be getting in aircraft. Unbelievable.
And some of them are literally just paintings. There's only 2 photos that NASA has of Earth, or images, the 2012 and the Blue Marble. I forget what that one was, a bunch of years later. But if you look at them, it makes no sense. The size of the U.S. is twice the size on one than the other.
Well, that's already debunked. Yes, it appears differently, as in those 2 Earth images there, but that's because of different amount of zoom and distance. You can recreate that exact effect with a globe on your desk. There's nothing underhand about that. Just a lack of understanding on your part.
The proportions aren't right. The Earth is either very tiny or doesn't have as many continents.
Doesn't have as many continents? What, you suggesting that they put out imagery and they forget Australia? Oh my goodness, I've not heard that before, David. That is weak.
It's once you look at them, you realize that they're not photographs. They're literally pieces of art.
No, they're composite images.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. In terms of the, do you think that other planets, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, do you think those are round, or are those bodies also flat?
So here's what we have to kind of get away from is the solar system. The solar system doesn't exist.
Apart from the fact that you can look at it. You've got photos on the screen there of Jupiter. In fact, that one you says is you, DITRH. I don't know. I don't believe you took that photo. Well, no, I can't say that. But if that was you, that is an excellent photo. So how would you deny that the solar system exists?
I call it the soul lure system. Basically, it's a way to steal your soul away. We're going to get into...
Bingo. Religion. That's what it's all coming down to, isn't it, David? Never mind the facts, never mind the science, never mind the evidence. It, in your mind, conflicts with your religion.
That in a little bit. But other planets, now I can look up. I have access to telescopes.
I suggest you use it then.
And stuff. And I could look up and see Saturn and Jupiter and the alignment we had. There are these things in the sky, but the only thing that we can say truthfully about them is that they're lights.
Well, if you've got a telescope of any decency, you're actually going to see the disk of Mars, the disk of Jupiter, not just a little light. Oh, and the disk of Saturn, of course, and the rings. Still just little lights? Or are you being economic with the truth there, David?
We don't know how big they are. We don't know how small they are. We don't know anything. If you look at Mars or Saturn, you can see it with your naked eye, but it's brighter than any star. You have to believe that the sunlight is reflecting off of that dusty, dirty ball and reflecting back to Earth brighter than any star. It looks like a little piece of the sun sometimes. It's so bright.
Do you realise how far away stars are, David? The nearest is, 4.2 light years away. So it's not going to appear that bright. You've got something that's planetary size, reflecting a hell of a lot of light against a black background. Yeah, it's going to look light.
And science, actual science, the inverse square law of light will teach us that there's no way it could be that bright. So those...
Well, remember, you're comparing it with the sun, which is about the brightest thing. Well, it is the brightest thing you're going to see in your, natural thing you're going to see in your lifetime.
Things that we're seeing are their own lights. They used to be called wandering stars.
Right. If they're their own lights, how is it we see shadows of them? Even Saturn's rings cast a shadow onto Saturn. The moons of Jupiter cast shadows onto Jupiter. If Jupiter is a light, how can it have a shadow on it? And as for wandering stars, I'm sick of you flat earthers using that. To the naked eye, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn look like very bright stars. The difference was they moved around. Hence the ancients called them wandering stars, which was quite a sensible thing for them to call them. You should know better.
And now all of a sudden they were named planets.
If people have questions for David Weiss, they can give us a call at 1-800-848-9222.
Yeah, I'd like to ask who lets him out.
Why, David, would any government, or let alone all the governments, want people to believe that the earth was round when it's actually flat? What do they gain by lying to the public about that?
Good question. And it wouldn't just be the governments, it would be everybody who worked for the governments and all the scientists, whether they worked for the governments or worked independently. And, for instance, with the astronomy side of things, any hobbyists. That's an awful lot of people that would have to be in on it for no readily apparent reason.
Yeah, so it's all about controlling our minds. Now, you would have to,
have a mind in the first place, David.
Be under the mindset that maybe the government isn't out for our best. Maybe there's some people in the government that aren't out for the best of the population.
No, I'm sure there's some people in the government who are just in it for power for themselves, to enrich themselves. I fail to see how the fact the Earth is a sphere or is a globe makes the damn sight difference as to how much power or money or whatever they have.
And they would want a way to control the people. So if you can convince people that they live on a speck in an infinite universe, spinning out of control, or an asteroid
spinning out of control. We're spinning around at a rate of once a day, and round the Earth, round the Sun, at the horrific speed of once a year. That's hardly spinning out of control. And as for asteroids, yeah, of course, one could hit us. They do from time to time.
Take them out at any moment, and we're going to run out of dinosaur juice for our cars.
Are you suggesting that oil is a resource that would never, ever, ever, ever run out?
And we evolved from a random accident, from a lightning strike that turned into an amoeba, that turned into a fish that grew legs, that turned into a monkey, that turned into a human.
I have a feeling, David, or two feelings. One, you really have no idea of what evolution is. And two, the idea of evolution challenges your religious belief. Back to that again.
That we are meaningless in the middle of a godless or distant God universe.
Well, he's certainly very least distant God. When was the last time he popped in?
One way, and we're on this prison planet where there's nothing else to discover.
There's loads to discover, if only you would open your eyes.
Versus the reality of our world is that we are
in a small puddle with the rest of the in the basement of the universe, under some sort of dome. I think that sounds more limited.
On an intelligently designed system where we are at the center of creation.
Yeah. You should be in the very center, shouldn't you, David? Perhaps you should have a throne and a crown, just to really show everyone your importance.
We are powerful spiritual beings having a physical experience here on this earth realm where nobody has dominion over us. Nobody can take away our God-given free will. And that
nobody is trying to take away your free will, David. No one's taking away your right of free speech, which is why you're able to spout this crap.
Our thoughts create our reality. And the analogy I use, the documentary with Keanu Reeves called The Matrix?
Documentary? The Matrix?
Sure.
So at the beginning of that, Neo is he's depressed. He's sleeping a lot. Something's wrong with the world. He can't figure it out, and that's because his conscious mind is separated from his soul's journey. And
his soul. So once again, religion's coming into it. There are religious overtones to that film, but it's a film, a story, make believe.
His soul, maybe you can look at your soul as like a piece of God or piece of creation. And
soul.
Your soul is here, knows what it wants to do, but his mind was separated, and he's trying to figure it out. Then if you look at him at the end of the movie, when he discovers who he is, where he is, what he is, and the power of his mind, he takes his power back, and the system has lost control over him.
And that's what you want, is it? To be able to put your hand up and stop bullets. Nice one, David.
If everybody knew that the earth was flat, the system would lose control of the people because...
Why?
They would take their power back.
What difference does it make? If tomorrow morning it was in the newspapers, on TV, definite proof the earth is flat, what would I do differently? Well, I'd probably still do my work. I guess I might have to pop to the shops on the way back. Me and Mrs. S would have to sit down for tea. Probably watch Netflix. So the world has changed exactly how much? Oh, I would have to close down my YouTube channel. I guess that would change if it turned out to be a flat earth. But other than that, no, nothing changes.
We're talking with David Weiss. He's host of the Flat Earth Podcast, 1-800-848-WABC if you have a question. Sam is in New Jersey. Sam, you're on with David Weiss.
Hi, how are you, Frankie? And how are you, David? I'm happy, David, you're not one of these evolutionist, anti-God people, and you sound like an awesome, smart individual.
So you're anti-evolution, aren't you?
My question is I think from my little perspective, people, both private industry people and public, forget NASA for a second, they're all retarded people, but they have took their private planes and all and flown east, for example, and they kept at it. They kept going east, and they came back to square A. To square one where they started. How do we explain that?
Yeah, well, let's get the explanation from David, but I don't think it's probably very fair to call people who can fly aircraft around the world retarded. Do you, Sam?
All right, perfect. So remember, we're on the Earth pond. It's a big circular pond with a bunch of islands. We'll call them continents. And at the center of the pond is the North Pole. Just imagine there's a big magnetic mountain there, and it's the North Pole. All compasses will point towards the center of the lake. So now let's say we're in New York.
Isn't that handy that this sun happens to go round where this magnetic North Pole is? And it isn't an actual pole, David, and it isn't a magnetic mountain. It's a magnetic field caused by the rotating iron core, molten iron core of the Earth. And I was thinking, with your pond, if that is the only part of the Earth plane that is melted, then how have the continents moved around? There wouldn't be room. Flat Earth fails in every possible way.
Let me ask you, David, why do you think we've had such an explosion in the Flat Earth movement?
Oh, is that why they're not making videos? They've all been blown up
over these last couple of years. What's caused this growth?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that. And you made a comment at the beginning, that we've known for years, and it's just only recently. That's not true. All of our history is a lie. So what has caused it? Well, there's always been flat earthers.
Seeing this video with David with this lady, it was rather upsetting video. At first I thought, it's quite nice the way he's talking to her. He had her in tears, manipulating a lady of, I think, 103 years old, lying to her.
I interviewed a woman in January of 2020. February of 2020, who was 102 years old. I was down in Florida. I was visiting my mom at where she lived, and I met this woman, and she's 102. She had her wits about her, and I was interviewing,
which is more than you've got, David,
her about the World's Fairs, because she had been to the World's Fair in New York, and and she lived in Connecticut. And she had such a great memory. She was telling me about her 5th birthday party and who was there. And I asked her what the name of her elementary school was. She knew the teacher, the class, some of the kids in the class, the street it was on, which is better than I could do.
Is that because you never went to school, David?
And I said to her, what? And I'd never mentioned this to her. And I said to her, what did they teach you in science about the Earth when you were in elementary school? And she looked at me and she goes, they taught me the Earth was flat, but then later on they changed it to a ball.
What's the betting? I don't know, but what's the betting? It was a religious-based school. and then they were forced to actually teach science. Like the whole thing with creation and evolution. That really wasn't that long ago that schools were forced to actually teach science, evidence, facts, rather than just religion.
And I asked her if she believed it. She said, yes, I did, because, they told me. And then I told her the whole story about what's going on, and she started crying. It was an amazing story, and I videoed the whole thing. I have it on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's absolutely shameful. You basically said that they were lying to her, that we never went to the moon, until she basically broke down in tears. Despicable.
But then we found out another woman from Croatia who said in the 1930s, every school was teaching flat Earth.
Again, so what? Things have moved on from there.
Then we started looking on microfilm and old newspapers, and we found article after article about teachers that were being persecuted in the 1920s here in the U.S. and in Europe.
Now, I actually looked up that story. I don't know if you can make it out. Bad conditions of affairs in England. Sir John Gorst accused of intention to teach false precepts. Basically, what it was several religious people threatened him. I think he was some counsellor or whatever, threatened him for teaching science because they wanted religious view, creation, flat earth taught. So the fact that back in 1900 there were some religious people who were fighting against progress means nothing. And progress has been made, had been made, until derp meisters like yourself came along.
For trying to teach heliocentrism in the classrooms, right? So this entire hijacking of our reality happened less than 100 years ago, right? Every civilization before us knew the Earth was flat.
No, and it's not saying it's sad because he did intend to teach false precepts. That was what the religious people accused him of. They accused him of teaching false precepts, whereas in fact it was science.
I was on a radio show yesterday afternoon promoting your appearance today, and a few different people brought me criticisms of the Flat Earth movement in general.
I bet they did.
One person said that there is vicious anti-Semitism within the Flat Earth movement.
There is.
And another person said that one Flat Earther recently destroyed 500 COVID vaccines.
Yes, he did. That story worldwide.
Do you want to respond to either of those, David?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So there is so much controlled opposition keeping this secret. If you Google Flat Earth, you end up at the Flat Earth Society, which is all nonsense.
It certainly is nonsense. I'm glad you recognise it. Unfortunately, most of the dirt they put out is the same as you.
All the images that you see of Flat Earth online are from the Flat Earth Society, and no one believes any of that. That is just to gatekeep your mind.
Yeah, shame you don't have images of what the Flat Earth looks like, though, isn't it?
The other thing is they start putting, disinfo agents, agitators, like Antifa, into the movement, and they try to do all these things. So
what, try and make you look silly? Too late.
Well, let's address the article about the pharmacist. That guy, the Flat Earth community is pretty tightly knit. Well, we saw that article. It came out today about the pharmacists that got rid of some vaccines, so they're putting anti-vaxxers, they're connecting it with Flat Earth.
There is a big connection. You check how many of those Flat Earth channels, let's say, for instance, Sleeping Warrior, just to name one that springs to mind, is doing anti-vax stuff. Loads of them are, because Flat Earth is dying. And he said, so first, nobody has ever seen this guy in any chats and any comments, and he doesn't have a YouTube channel. How do you know? That's given his name. If it gave my name, would you have connected that with Mr. Sensible? Are you saying you know every single Flat Earth? Actually, you could do, because there's about 12 of you.
He has nothing. So a flat earther that has a name that sounds a lot like Heisenberg and looks a lot like Heisenberg from Breaking Bad, that's just a coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hey, I look a lot like him. In fact, one time I had a beard like that. Does that mean I'm a flat earther, or does it mean I'm a star of Breaking Bad? I don't know.
Came up, and he's a flat earther that says the government put a dome over the sky so we can't see God. No flat earther has ever even thought of that concept.
Oh, no flat earther has ever said that there's a constructed dome.
Okay, so it's a totally made-up story.
Yeah.
And then addressing the other part about anti-Semitism, well, everybody loves me, and I'm Jewish, so I don't know where that's coming from.
Well, okay, fair enough. That's good for you, David. I have absolutely no problem with you being Jewish. I've got supporters who are Jewish, and that shouldn't come into it either way. But there certainly are anti-Semites in the Flat Earth community, and I came across one not 2 days ago. Validation Boy. Listen to the first 10 seconds of his video.
Today I want to talk a little bit about evolution. The Jay-owned public indoctrination camps that we call the public school system.
So there you go. There are certainly anti-Semites in the Flat Earth community.
Other than Eric Dubé, who's one of the early flat earthers, he has some questions about the Holocaust, and he put out some videos. Now, he's not an anti-Semite.
He's just a Holocaust denier, David?
Had questions about the Holocaust. Well, the media took that and connected them together and said flat earthers are anti-Semites.
Well, I would suggest, or I would posit, that it sounds like he may be.
The other thing the media put out there is crazy flat earther kills himself trying to prove the earth is flat in a homemade rocket. Well, Mad Mike Hughes, the guy was a flat earther. He was smart enough to know the earth was flat, but he was an Evel Knievel stuntman who wanted to get the world record for a steam-powered rocket jump. He was going to jump like 1,800 feet. There's buildings in New York that are way taller than that. So he wasn't doing it to prove the earth was flat. But
No, and I don't think he was a flat earther. I think he was someone who realised that there's a lot of mugs who'll cough up some money to support his stunt.
He needed money for some new steam compressors, and this was going to be a big televised event. So he was trying to raise money. So some flat earthers said, hey, we'll raise the money for you if we can put a billboard on your rocket that says research flat earth.
There you go. However, loads and loads of flat earthers were claiming him as some sort of flat earth hero. I should have flogged billboards on my Mage high altitude balloon. I missed a trick there, didn't I?
I see.
So the media took that and said, oh, this guy tried to prove the earth was flat in his little steam-powered rocket and killed himself.
David,
again, another media story.
I have to pause, but it's a fascinating subject and a fascinating conversation, and I'm wondering if we can pick a day within the next week or two to continue the discussion.
100%.
Thank you. David Weiss, check out the Flat Earth Podcast.
Or don't. Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Frankie, for having me on WABC Talk Radio, The Other Side of Midnight. Big thanks to any and all of you who made it this far through the video. I appreciate it. It shows that although that radio interview went out at 2 or 3 in the morning, how many people's homes and cars did David get his rubbish views and beliefs into? That just explains why we need to keep fighting this rubbish. Massive thanks to my amazing members and patrons, and I'll see you all soon. Take care and stay sensible. I want to give massive thanks to all of my supporting members and patrons. Thank you all so very much.
Shut up and sit down.